Time for our 360 round. We're diving into the state of quantum computing. We've got some earnings to chew on today from IonQ and Rigetti Computing. For our panel today, joining us, we've got Stephen Dickens, CEO and Principal Analyst, Hyperframe Research, and Sveta Kolinska, Founder and CEO of Ryla Global Consulting. Thank you both so much for joining us today. All right, so our jumping off point is we have some results from within the quantum computing sector, but I want to get both of your big picture takes. So we had results from Rigetti showing that they earned $1.5 million. That is down from the same time a year ago, sharply lower, $3.1 million a year ago. So that was a miss on revenue. They did report EPS of 13 cents per share. That beat estimates for a loss. They were expecting that. IonQ came in essentially in line with expectations for revenue, 7.5 million, just above that. EPS, a loss of 14 cents a share. We were expecting a worse loss in there. Stephen, I'll start with you, your take. What does that signal about kind of the broader quantum computing industry?
So, Diane, I think we shouldn't be focused on those headline numbers from either those firms or any other bigger players in the space. I think this is a long-term bet. This is where GPU was 10, 15 years ago. This is where the internet was in 95, 96. We are still so early in this market and it's still so nascent that I think focusing in on the numbers, whilst they give us a picture, some of the myths that you talked about, we're talking about such small revenue numbers. What we've got to be looking at is where these guys are fundamentally with the technology, not on their numbers in this quarter.
Okay, so we have to look at fundamentally where they are, and it's still early. Is quantum computing finally moving out of the lab and into the real world, or when is it?
It's such a great question. So as Stephen actually said, I do think that what we're talking about here is very much a long-term bet. And this is actually what investors say online on public forums and open source intelligence. We understand that this is what people actually think. So is this technology actually going to come to play in real life soon? Is actually the big differentiator between the companies that we're talking about today. And they actually use different tactics in terms of how they are making up for that revenue. So as reported, the two companies reported different revenue, so different, obviously, percentages of growth. But also we have to take into account that there were some acquisitions made by one of the players. So how do we take that into account is also very important. And as also Stephen said, the other part is technology. So what is the difference in the technologies? Because when we talk about quantum, we do have to say that there are different approaches. There are two different approaches that these companies are taking the technology. And it's also very important to mention that they don't just sell the hardware. These companies sell the vision of the future, which is cloud integrations and also SDK, so software developer kits that they can implement in real life.
So, Stephen, I want to get your views about how this plays out in terms of the relationship with big tech and smaller names like these, like an IBM or AWS. Are they then going to are they being perceived as partners or competitors to these smaller companies?
So I was with IBM last week, the AMA with Arvind Krishna, their CEO. Questions asked of him around the long-term bet around what IBM's doing with its quantum computing, its Q platform. I've visited their facility up in upstate New York where they've got 8 of those systems online. I think if I was looking at this overall sector, I'd be looking at some of the big names, the AWSs, the Googles, the Microsofts, the IBMs that I mentioned there. They give you exposure to quantum, so you're not got that missing from your portfolio, but also you can benefit from some of the other things they're doing around AI. If I look at some of the names we're talking about, I see consolidation in the market. Is NVIDIA going to get into this space? Do we see other big names? Sveta covered it perfectly with the cloud integration. I think it's a trifecta. You need cloud, you need quantum, and you need AI to scale this to production.
Okay, so you need all of them to scale the production. So what do you see as, you have insight to the investor conversations around quantum and AI. What do you see as the connective tissue there?
Many connective tissues I can point out to. So investors are really, really laser focused on several things. So the first one is actually we just can't not talk about China and of course the tariffs and the updates that have happened. So investors do believe that quantum, so again, not only hardware, because we're talking about software and innovation, AI as well, is crucial when it comes to defense, so U.S. defense strategies, This is also where it's important to highlight that these two companies that you mentioned, they do work heavily with the government. They have gotten large investments from the DoD as of last year. And I do agree with Stephen that it is important to show that high flexibility on the connective tissue when it comes to how do they integrate into organizations, because as he mentioned earlier, long term, what we want to see is actual application of quantum, again, hardware technology in real life at brands and at large organizations. And the only way for that to happen is really for these companies to come up with a solution that could be implemented right away, and not just a service, because right now they do very heavily focused on services.
All right, well, we'll have to leave our conversation there. Shares of both IonQ and Rigetti under pressure today, but they are sharply higher on a year-over-year basis. So investors certainly believing in the long-term profile, the long-term investor profile when it comes to quantum computing. Our thanks to Stephen Dickens, CEO and Principal Analyst, Hyperframe Research, and Sveta Kalinska, Founder and CEO, Ryla Global Consulting.